So yeah,
We
this
got
is
about a
good.
minute, gentlemen.
This is good. Thank you for asking, Stanley. Thanks, John. I feel
No
like we're
problem.
on a show, man. Like, like we're just going to the afternoon session.
All right, well, we'll get started here, everybody. It's going to be for about an hour long, so I'd like to welcome everybody for increasing opportunities for mental health housing in our community. Just to let everybody know that this session is being recorded. You should have gotten notice of it. I'm going to ask if everyone can please, if you do have any questions for Stanley and Sean later on while they're giving the presentation, if you can, please put that in the chat. What we'll do is we'll address those questions at the end of the session. Or if it's something's really important, stuff like that, we'll address it right then, especially if I notice it happens to be part of the question that we're talking about at that time. If you can also too, I'm going to ask you if you can please put your video, stop video, so we cannot see you. And the reason why I'm just saying that, if you can go up to your view box in your thing and put on speaker. So this lets you give you a little better picture of who's talking, just so you know if it's Sean or Stanley talking, asking the questions, you'll just be able to see them a little bit better too as well. Once again, please make sure that everybody is muted during this session. And we'll go ahead and start this. We're going to go with a guided discussion. And then, like I stated before, we'll end up with a question and answer at the end of the session. So real quick, just before we do get started, and Sean and Stanley have the chance to introduce themselves, let me introduce myself to everybody. My name is John Grzinczyk. I'm a reentry coordinator with ODRC. I cover the Akron region. So I cover basically all of northeast of Ohio, from Lake County, Ashtabula, all the way down into the New Philly area. So it's a total of 16 counties. So I'd like to thank Sean and Stanley for joining here today. So we'll go and get started here because our time is valuable and I want to make sure we get every questions answered that we can. So if you can, gentlemen, if you can, go ahead and introduce yourselves to everybody online here. Tell us about the organization you're with and geographic area you cover and just what experience you do have in this area. Before we get started. So we'll go ahead and start with Sean first.
Oh man, you okay, Stanley? Like, remember the sign? Hey, we appreciate you guys joining us. I appreciate the opportunity. That's it. But hey, I really appreciate the opportunity and the work I get to do here in Toledo, Ohio, with our community and our partners is just help people that are just running into some barriers, maybe a bad choice, but just to kind of bring it together. I work for Neighborhood Properties. Neighborhood Properties owns about 500 units. It comes with housing support. It comes with peer support. So once a person get housed, I think what we've all learned, just because you give somebody a address doesn't end poverty. I give you a zip code doesn't end what's really going on. So the cool thing about when you get housed through Neighborhood Properties is you get the housing support. So, hey, do you have your electric? Is it budgeted? How's things going with rent? How's things going with groceries? Do you need some clothes? So what I've got to be as a part of this awesome organization for the last 2.5 years to see that happening. I came from the shelter world from 2011. So what I briefly talked about with Stanley before we jumped on, John, was I came here and the mission is great, but there's always four walls surrounding your work. You get to talk about God, you get to work with people. I've worked 16 different roles in that organization, but this organization, I'm just going to say I get to do the same similar work, but there's no walls. Like I can go for open warrants. I can go up here any kind of case. I can pick you up. I can take you to Port Clinton. And so what I get to do is I get to serve people in the surrounding area. And if I need to go further, I just need to ask or you need to let me know. So I'm just trying to summarize this because I'm really excited what I get to do. But when I meet you, it's because you came to me, you got referred from a mental health agency that said you have substance abuse or mental health. To me, that's how I get people. But once you get me, I just call you and go, hey, this is Sean. If I'll tell you how I work. If you're a female, I send you my business card because if you have somebody that don't trust you, hey, here's this guy's card. You can see him. Here's my phone number. Here's my cell number. Here's my organization. And I just had two great conversations before I jumped on this call. And one lady was crying. So all I do is I say, what do you want to do? What barriers do you have? And by the grace of God, people go, this is what I'm dealing with. And you get this magnificent conversation. And that's why the one girl was crying. She goes, I just got to have a great conversation. And I'm like, oh my God, but that's called about being passionate about what you do. Now, do I have all the answers for everybody? No. Because I get to go with you through every step of the way. Sometimes it's a no, I don't have the resources, but every time I have a conversation with somebody, I listen and go, man, where can we help somebody? Okay. But through all that, That's the best way to say it. So Shelter World since 2011, I probably work in the shelter maybe 48 hours a month by design, because there's that thing where you have to balance things inside of you. Right now, I have a caseload that's about 34, which is more than we should because, a coworker took another position. So I just manage that. But there's this thing about it though, is I love doing it. So I don't think it's Monday I'm going in. Just think about it. For the last 13, 14 years, man, you're just helping people, man. We're right where they're at. And it's exciting for me. Maybe that's why I'm excited, because I look at it as an exciting role, and it's meaningful. But if you looked at it as your paycheck or I have to go do this, you'd be done. Um, and last point, even in the shelter I came from, I outlasted everybody. That's including the CEO, every frontline staff, every supervisor. And that's only by the grace of God, because in shelter world, usually that's a short window, man. There's this thing called burnout, or 50% of the people behave their way out of an organization. So by the grace of God, I get to sit here with you, John and Stanley, and our audience, and then just be a part of this great panel. Stanley.
Well, great job. It's hard to second that up, Sean. And I am just so honored and so grateful to be in this room full of people who are passionate and get to do the work day in, day out. It is such a privilege and an honor to be here, and I'm thankful for this opportunity. So my name is Stanley Frankart. I wear a myriad of different hats. I serve through the Licking County Coalition for Housing as the Community Transitions Program and Returning Home Ohioans Program Coordinator, helping, similar to what Sean does, with supportive housing, working with privatized landlords and community partners to make sure individuals who are navigating reentry, who identify as individuals with severe and persistent mental illness or chronic substance use disorder, that they have the supports necessary to make successful reentry. I also serve with the Young Christian Professionals organization. I call myself a reentry mentor. Myself, having been justice involved, I started off very early in life, was caught my first charge at 10 years old, literally have been justice involved since then. And so, now on the front end of my reentry, I'm just so thankful and grateful to be able to reach back and help other brothers and sisters through our lived experience. Our whole team of Young Christian Professionals are people who identify as individuals with lived experience, and we come with evidence-based programming. We come with lived experience programming. We have peer support, reentry support, and we cover all the way from Cleveland, Ohio, down to Cincinnati, Ohio. There is a team of people who are there that have lived experience, want to see people succeed, are willing to go. I like to say, this is our saying amongst our team, we will go to hell and back if we have to fight for your highest good. And so we do that with people day in and day out, work with people who have been justice involved, are justice involved. We serve their families as well, equipping them with tools and resources to navigate that journey with them, because we know that's a difficult reintegration sometimes. So we have Creating Lasting Family Connections, an evidence-based program that reduces recidivism by 62%.
Nice.
We also have budget and financial planning for individuals who, maybe have some struggles with financial literacy. We try to work with them through the Getting Ahead While Coming Home curriculum, which is another evidence-based practice. And then all of that complemented with over 35 years of lived experience of people who have been justice involved, incarcerated in state prisons, federal prisons, jails, and institutions, and also navigating reentry themselves. So that is a little bit about who I am and who we are as an organization. And again, it's such an honor and a privilege to be here with all of you.
Amen.
Well, thank you, Sean and Stanley, for being here. We really appreciate it. Building Bridge is all about collaboration. And part of this, addressing this today with the mental health population, find life housing, what are some of your current collaborations that you have right now that is successful? And if you can develop your dream team, your basketball team here, to really tackle this issue, who would you want also on that team in your areas, or even throughout the whole entire state? We've heard about collaboration with state representatives. We heard about the last session we just had someone collaborating with from South Carolina. So who else would you see that you would really want brought in on your collaboration to help address this issue?
Hey, John, I gotta put it like this. Sorry, Stanley, is we gotta take it from like your zip code on up. Obviously, you can grab further away geographically, but locally, I think we have a really good dream team. For example, to the Lucas County Homeless Board, right? Lucas County Metro Housing Authority, behavioral health people, because that's where it all goes around, right? Because whether I'm asking for funds, or whether I'm asking for vouchers, or I'm saying, hey, we have some mental health concerns, like even a Mildred Bear, a neighborhood health association. So you have to create that stabilization. So I mean, I can reach far, right? I can reach across the state, but and that's good. Maybe what I'm trying to say is that my elevation, I'm reaching right for the stuff that's in reach. So we need some other folks to reach further. I just haven't hit that point in my career yet. But for now, I think we have the resources around us. Because we're reaching for landlords. There could be this dream team of landlords that say, and we've all had that problem. One of my earlier careers was a real estate agent and property manager. I used to manage 24 units on my own. So I get to see that piece, but right now we're having all those conversations. So the next piece I would say, and I love the question, if there's a bigger dream team, maybe just as one landlord that has so many units that there's never a shortage of houses, duplex, triplexes. uh, I don't care, man. You need a ranch, you need chickens, whatever. I got chickens, but whatever you need, pets, that's the person we need. We don't have that person because we do have a population of landlords, but it's only if we can fit the criteria, right? Only if we can squeeze the credit score by, squeeze the offense by, squeeze the 3 times the income amount by, squeeze a landlord reference by. So give me a landlord, sort of like the Monopoly board. Who designed the game? Who built the game? Is it Warner Brothers?
Hasbro.
There it's Stanley. Hasbro. So I need Hasbro on my team.
Yeah, I think just to add a little bit to that, Sean, that's a great response. I second that notion. If we had a landlord who had as many houses as he does pockets, that would be awesome. But nevertheless, we would. I would say, currently one particular partnership that our organization has is with a UMADOP in actually Richland County, Mansfield UMADOP, and it's been super successful in helping individuals who are experiencing some resistance and barriers to housing. And they do that because they partner with us and other community partners to provide kind of that holistic treatment, right? And it's allowed people to succeed, to create those success stories. During our last discussion, they were talking a lot about just being able to promote success stories. I think sometimes that helps landlords remove some of those barriers and some of those walls, right? Just saying, hey, here are some success stories and some things that have worked, and here's why they've worked. But also being able to kind of deal and address, once we deal with the primary focus, we come from a housing first philosophy. So like until we address the immediate need of housing, a lot of times people aren't willing to work on these other things, whether it be substance use, mental illness, whatever the case may be, education, employment. So once we deal with the housing piece first, it's a model that has been accepted nationwide. It's also a very good model because I think once some people have stability, they're willing to begin to address these other things that maybe led to some of that instability, but they're willing then to work on their mental health, their substance use, and their co-occurring needs. And those are met by a local provider. Central to the location of the resident or the tenant. And so that's been working really successful. That's been a partnership that for me personally, I found to be fruitful. We try to replicate that in every single county that we serve. And I would say that if I had to build a dream team, if it was like the Chicago Bulls of the heyday, I think my dream team would be a table of people of threefold: people with lived experience who have been able to successfully navigate housing, recovery, and local community providers, because people who have navigated these things personally, at least from my experience, are better equipped to help others navigate and provide the necessary tools, the necessary support, and encouragement to help others overcome the unknown, the unseen, and sometimes unrecognized barriers and obstacles, right? So, connecting people to community providers, a lot of times people don't understand. I had a client today, perfect example. He rides the bus. We gave him a 31-day bus pass, and the bus didn't show up today. Now you would be looking at me like, Stan, how in the world did the bus not show up when it's scheduled to come? But literally that's public transportation for you. And so like having somebody who's navigated that experience creates a little bit more empathy, creates a little bit more grace, and it allows us to share that moment with that individual, to let them know and embrace them where they are and say, I admire your resilience and your perseverance because I know what it took to get here today.
Amen.
And so because of that, creating that kind of mutual relationship. And then the second people at that table, I would say donors who have deep pockets and deep hands, because there is so much need within the community of people who are navigating reentry that literally I myself have found myself just in this current quarter for young Christian professionals. We have literally spent $29,000 just in a quarter on getting people housed. That doesn't mean like hygiene, that isn't clothing, that isn't employment, that isn't transportation, just housing alone, $29,000 just in a quarter. So if we had donors that had deep pockets and deep hands with a willingness to be advocates and to trust those who have that lived experience to shape what this looks like, that would be a blessing. I think the third people that I would have at that table would be the community partners, right? So that means ODRC, that means the mental health provider, that means in my scenario, like we work with BHP real often in the main place. So behavioral healthcare partners, all of these providers at the table, again, willing to sit at the feet of those with lived experience and learn. Because I'm telling you, there is something about peer supporters who bring their lived experience to the table that if we just allow them to have a little bit of authority and equitable opportunities to shape what this thing could look like, I think systemically we could change the trajectory of what this looks like. We've been talking about housing literally since 2017. I came home from prison in 2017, and housing has been a crisis at the center of this conversation since then. And I've talked to people who have lived experience, who have the most innovative, collaborative, and I would even say deep approaches to bring about life transformation. And sometimes they're just not heard. And so being able to sit at the table with those three, I think would be my dream team.
Amen.
Thank you. Now, Sandy, you're talking about barriers that you're facing and stuff like that. Is there a particular barrier or pushback that you have experienced with dealing with someone with a mental health issue compared to even over, just a normal person with a criminal record? Is there a difference? Is there something that really stands out that you have noticed and finding new opportunities for housing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think just to give a few tangible experiences and challenges is one is stigma, right? A lot of times people have a hesitance because of that stigma and ostracize individuals who are navigating mental health. And then those implicit and explicit biases, right? I think that creates that resistance, and it views individuals navigating mental illness treatment and their pathway to recovery as people who kind of don't deserve an opportunity or maybe as equitable treatment as other people. And ultimately, when we look at it, man, they deserve that equity. They deserve that desirable treatment because they're created in the image of God. Like the reason why we get upset about injustices is because we recognize the worth of humanity. And that's because of the Imago Dei in people. And so the image of God in people is what makes us enraged about injustices. And I find that sometimes the competency of people who are navigating mental wellness treatment, I find that sometimes they it's questioned, right? And my response is, if they're in recovery, how are they not competent? Like if they're in recovery, why are they not competent? And so oftentimes I think there's a defensiveness and opposition that comes due to just an unwillingness to change the status quo. Or even just from a fear of the unknown. And so when providing tangible solutions to provide new housing opportunities, many people are just so overwhelmed by the need and the constant push that when it emerges again, it's almost as if like it's expected to fail or not work. And so a lot of times I find some resistances, well, why try? And so I think those are just some of the barriers and obstacles that I personally experienced, being a person who's, co-occurring as well and in recovery from mental illness myself, just the stigma and then again, the hesitancy, the resistance, the ostracizing, and the implicit and explicit biases.
Thanks. Sean, do you have noticed anything?
Yeah. So you started out the conversation with mental health. So for example, the lady yesterday is you start with this relationship. So I've never heard somebody blame like 3 of the past presidents. They stole all her money. She's in her car. It's the Illuminati. It's my son. And so our work is forming these relationships. And it took her all of about 3 minutes to ramp up. So there's just different man, I don't want to use the word categories because we're human, but there's different levels of service. So the initial service is, how are you doing? My name is Sean. And then once you get the relationship, you can slowly work people through, but not everybody is willing to let you into their life or let you in. Because sometimes right now it's just a phone call. But guess what? You're not willing to meet, you're part of them. And again, I'm not making stuff up, but it's the black helicopter thing. And then, but you're living in your car, right? Shelters isn't an option. You were in a hotel. There's 2 recent evictions. Like I said, I told Stanley, I don't care how many evictions you got. I just need to get an idea what barriers that we have. So there's this mental health piece where, first of all, do you qualify or do you not qualify? Like for housing first, okay? So let's get you a house. But if you can't have a conversation, or 2 weeks ago when the guy goes, I'm just going to come turn the place up and threaten gun violence, then how can we get this person home? You can go back and look at this record, which I did, is it started when your mom was trading you off at a local park. Your mom had some menacing. So again, not judging him, but you look at this young man who grew up in a family like that at 27 years old. I'm like, I told him like this, man, I got 5% arrogance. I said, I'm really good at what I do. And I had to say that on purpose, not to be arrogant. But I said, man, long as you treat me safely, I can work with you. So again, it was clear mental health. And so here's this thing where there's a certain level of pushback, right? Where we're trying to, this is before we can even do an application. And this starts back even in the shelter world, right? So I told you I was in the shelter for 13 years. Well, when you get kicked out of all the shelters, how can we really get you an address? How can we really get you into services, right? How can we get you off the bench? And it's not always how do we get you? It's what relationship, what has to happen where you said, I've had enough before you die out there. I can name names of people that have died since I've been doing this work on the street, like diehard individuals that would not come off the street. So you got to look at that as mental health, because you can't just scoop people up, man. We're talking about human beings. We're talking about dignity. We're talking about choices. We're talking about freedom. So the mental health has a lot of things attached with it. Even though, like I'm trying to say, we're good at what we can do. This work is all before we can get to an application. This work is all before I can get you into a call. So even though we have all the resources, the question is, what do we do before you freeze to death? That was a lot. So I kind of just unpacked it like a shotgun.
Who does that work, Sean?
What's that?
Who's responsible for that work?
So I love the question for several reasons. For one, the guy that lays at the corner, and this is a true story. I'm not going to give anything that's fake or anything I read about. So the guy that's laid at the corner for years and years and years, hundreds of conversations, hundreds of case notes, died. Let's say, I think it was about 8 months ago. Didn't make it. It was a veteran, didn't want the services, came back to the same location. So what happened is TPD would say, and again, please forgive me, man, I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. Can you just move over there? Can you just move over here? Or then you have people that go, it's just him. You know what I mean? So you begin to go, oh man, it's more than trash. It's a human being. So to this day, it breaks my heart to go past that spot, because I'm like, man, a freaking dude's gonna die right here in the spot. And sure enough, man, he died at the spot he came back to lay at. So when you say whose fault it is, right? Hundreds of case notes, work since 2011. I don't have the answer for you. I don't.
No, Sean, I think that's a great question, Doug. Just to share a little bit from our own point of view as well. One of the things that I've noticed is I got a friend named Quincy. He stands literally at the exit ramp to get to my house off of the highway. And I go and see him at least once a week, and I just talk to him, right? Just do life with him. And sometimes, he's shared with me, he truly, and I think I think this is really what he is. I think he's an archaeologist who thinks he's on the brink of a breakthrough. And so, I tell my friend Quincy, well, man, what can I do to help you, get to your breakthrough, man? And, it's buying him little shovels and, sometimes getting him some food. I brought him a little portable heater that, he didn't need to plug in or anything like that. And I bring him batteries every single week, make sure he has batteries to use that heater because it's cold. But sometimes people really, truly are in a place where they have accepted that this is how life is to be lived. They truly believe that this is what they want to do. And so we use an individualized approach, right? It's a self-directed, a self-motivated life. And if that's what people choose, like, I'm not going to sit here and drag you kicking and screaming, because that's not going to help you. That's not going to help us. And long term, that's not
They
gonna
have
help
their
us.
agency. They have their agency.
Exactly. And
Hey.
we want to empower people with self-efficacy and choice. That is the aim of what we do, because for so long, specifically dealing with people who are navigating reentry and mental illness, people have been stripped of their choice. And so in a sense of empowerment is giving them that right to choose back and giving them the self-directed, self-motivated, self-efficacy to choose their life and what success looks like for them. So that's just my friend Quincy. That's an example that we're navigating. And I still check on him to this week. I mean, literally, I'll sit down sometimes and just have a meal with him right there on the side of the highway and have fun with him. And he's a great guy, very coherent, can have a conversation with me. And I still, to this day, I think he believes, and I believe with him, that he's an archaeologist on the brink of a breakthrough. So
Hey, Stanley and Doug, back to your question. So the thing that you can see is hundreds, I mean, case noted conversations. So what if there would have been zero conversations? A man dies. So back to what Stanley said, man, we can take it a day at a time. And I'm not going to violate the person. His name was Howie. How are you? You know, F you, F you. How are you doing, man? How can I serve you? And what do you need? So out of those hundreds of conversations, I believe that's the best we can do, because no matter what, you can't drag him and put him in his apartment. He was just there, man. And it does break your heart that he passed away. And then where's he? You know what I mean? And so I love that question, Doug. And why Stanley was talking, I think who's responsible? Anybody that can have a conversation with that man, anybody that can see him, anybody that can dial 911 and say, hey, I need a safety check. Anybody passing by that man and seeing him lay there. So as Stanley was talking, man, the Holy Spirit just said, we all have that responsibility. You don't have to take him home. You don't. Stanley's not taking Quincy home, but it falls on the community. And there was one county where the business owner, like if that guy's laying in your doorway every day, how about you're the primary relationship, right? Because you're giving him the coffee, you're giving him the blanket. So you're the primary role. And if you can bounce off of that and do all your resources, man, I think that's the solution, Doug. Whoever can develop a primary relationship, because that's where it begins. I just want to know, do you care?
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. Love what I get to
Thanks.
do.
No, thank you. So Sean, you bring up a great point here. We're in the community-based care approach, because we closed down the mental health hospitals. This is something we might have been able to do back in the 80s. Of this individual really needed the help, so let's get him in a mental health hospital, get him the treatment, get him housed. Do you know of any module or any kind of other step-down facility, not even just in the state of Ohio, but across the nation, that you've heard of, that maybe we should maybe learn a little bit more about to really maybe bring to Ohio, or anything like that you know of?
We do permanent support even housing here at NPI. So you do your SPDAT, you do your score, you have an impairment, so you can get housed. You can. We have 500 units that are full. We have a waiting list, okay? What I learned is now you have a housing support manager. Like Stanley said, now you get a peer. The peer can go underneath the housing support person. Hey, take them here, take them there. Transportation, resources. Hey, I see your rent's not paid. So that model is working. It's working so well, we're full. There's 500 units. And when I tell people, like I have 3 clients waiting to get on get housed, but who's going to want to move out, right? Well, if you got a great subsidy, you got great support, your rent's being paid, and you've been home as long as you've been home. Matter of fact, this is the first Christmas I've been home, or the first winter I haven't had to be outside. So the only people that are actually moving out is if let's just say if you're not compliant or you're deceased. And I don't like to tell people that we're waiting for somebody to die. I won't say that. But you really create this backlog, because guess what? I'm housed, right? And the goal is to keep you housed. The goal isn't like, hey, you're smoking in front of your building, you got to leave. Or, hey, we noticed some trash on the sidewalk, you got to leave. Or, hey, we noticed you had something to drink today. The office I get to work at outside of this is there's a 13 unit place where MPI says, hey, there's this great space. We need you to have a presence. So every day I get to go to work and there's 13 individuals in this complex. Okay. So what I get to see and do every day is I'm not going to violate people, but this person has been in shelter care that I know because I was in the shelter world for 12 years. I get to see him go home now. He does the same thing he was doing when he went to the shelter, but guess what? He's going home and he makes it home every day. The guy on this side happens to be one of my Hope clients. And so I get to see him doing the same thing, but he's not sleeping in his car over behind Super Fitness, right? This lady that's over here had 3 episodes where she's intoxicated, but she's not in a shelter, right? And so what I get to see is you give people the address. So permanent supportive housing is it, because an address doesn't cure poverty. An address gives you a place to go home and call it home. We all deserve that. And I'm not trying to be like that's kind of like the popular phrase, but it's called permanent supportive housing. When the individual gets home, you don't leave them at home, right? You get to knock on the door. Is electric paid? I can't tell you how many people. My other client, and I promise I'll stop. You owe the dope man $130, but your gas is getting shut off. Like, get a medicinal card. Like, if we're gonna do this, well, I don't like their type of weed. I said, but your gas is getting shut off, so we got to figure this out. So fast forward, we got to figure it out, right? But he was making some choices where if you get your gas and your electric turned off, you're going to lose your voucher. So this family isn't out of the weeds, right? They just happen to have an address. We're just not dealing with this at Motel 6. We're not dealing with this inside of a shelter in your home. So there's a certain level of autonomy that's growing, right? Because now we got a budget for this and a budget for that. Does the dope man still show up? Yeah, I can't fix that. So
Let me ask you a question, Sean, just to follow up. You mentioned that the supportive housing you guys have is for 500 people. What would be, if I could say I could wipe out the waiting list now, how many more beds do you think you'd need?
man, I don't want to below this. I know that we're probably waiting for about 15 or 20 people right now. And I don't want to get myself or the organization in trouble, but I just know there's about 20 people right now that if we could pull off an apartment, you're home. Because once it passes inspection, you know how fast it goes. We're signing a lease, right?
Mhm.
Here's a deferred payment for your security deposit. We already know there's concerns, but you have a housing support manager. And then here's what's really cool. You would get me if you happen to be one of my clients, but man, back to your question, John, like let's just give us 50 units, man. Let's just double that.
No, that's completely understandable. I mean, like I said, I was even thinking maybe 100 to 200. I mean, just because if your program is doing that well, people are going to hear about it. And you got some people
Yeah.
that might have been on the waiting list for a year. I don't know how long the
Yeah.
waiting list is. Well, now they found their own housing, but they really need that support. That's why I was just kind of curious.
Yeah.
That's all.
Because we get you from the community list as well. So the community list is you've called 211, you've done your spit out, you've done your intake, they get all your documents, social security card, birth certificate, all your ID, all that's in place, okay? Or you're working with an outreach person who takes your files and gets it in place from like, let's just say an internal referral, right? So you have external referrals and internal referrals. So you could actually ramp that up. But there's humans that are doing the work, that are trained to do it, that are passionate about it, finding the guy with the sign, finding the lady with the sign, finding the veteran with the sign. So yeah, there you go.
Thank you. Stanley, I'll ask you the same question. Do you know of any kind of module or step down module that's occurring in the state of Ohio that you really would like and would like to bring to Lucas County or across the nation?
Yeah, I think the permanent supportive housing piece is crucial. I have found that to be successful as well. Being a part of the community transitions program and returning home Ohioans, that's the motto that we use: intensive case management, motivational interviewing, assertive engagement. And what we try to do is we create case plans, right? So it's kind of that essence of like, okay, we know this isn't going to be lifetime of the subsidy. However, what can we do to get you in position to where you are stable and you are able to do this independently, autonomously. And so we begin to work towards that. We work towards the goals of as simple as, hey, I need to get my GED so I can get a meaningful job, right? I need to be able to get, my license back. And so that way now I can drive to my job. So, we work towards them with those case plans. I think another model that I found to work specifically for people navigating severe and chronic homelessness is the transitional housing model. And it's used, again, by those who are on the brink of severe homelessness or who are experiencing it. And these TH models provide that kind of bridge between individuals who are homeless, literally sleeping in tent communities, things like that. And then allowing them the ability to have that intensive case management for a segmented amount of time. So they have a start date and an end date. And they know that, hey, at 12 months, I am going to have to accomplish these milestones to be able to maintain this independently. Then they also have the in-home support. So sometimes I, from my own experience, some of our clients don't even know how to turn on a stove. They don't know how to work a microwave. So how do we help them navigate those life skills? That's where the in-home support comes into play. Then also, again, connecting them to those community partners, because again, once this relationship maybe is in a different season or a different phase of life, who is going to be what I like to call the Paracletos, the Holy Spirit that's going to walk with you through this journey. And so, I think that we could enhance this model specifically for people in recovery from mental illness simply by providing that peer supporter. Again, I'm an advocate for that because I've seen it time and time again at work. And literally, one of the statistics that we have for peer support is literally 3% recidivism, 3%. Yeah. And I mean, it's amazing.
Stan,
Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, can I ask you about that? Because I've asked myself, my sister is severely mentally ill. And I asked myself, she's lived, I finally just brought her to us.
Yeah.
But, and I don't know how much data you have, but she has to be in better shape, I know, than she is today. But somebody still with real mental illness, but not in a severe state, can they live together without staff there? Are you finding that is a viable situation?
So yeah, I think that's individualized, if that makes sense. So I think that's
Absolutely.
a case by case basis. I think it's possible. And the reason why I think it's possible is because we have a boarding house right now with 2 individuals who identify as bipolar and schizophrenic. And they are able, under, contingent that they're continuing to be med compliant, doing their follow-up counseling appointments, working with a therapist, working with a psychiatrist and a peer supporter, they have been able to mitigate that relationship now for 7 months. And they've continued to live together, to thrive together. One of them is actually working with the Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities. And then the other one right now is working with a second chance employer, and has found that, like, for the first time in their lives, they have found stability. And it also gives them an essence of community support, right? Somebody who's navigated the same journey as them, similar to what a peer supporter does. And so it's a I think it's a case by case basis. It's a very fine line. And I think that if done appropriately and correctly in the right context, I think it can work. Can work.
So, sorry.
No,
I want to suggest a deferred discussion is, how do we create a model whereby these 2 individuals, 3 or 4 individuals can live in a home together, but they're supported on a lesser basis? This is their home, but they're supported on a lesser basis by some sort of community resource. It's a longer discussion, so I don't.
Hey, Doug, really adult care facilities where there's an operator, right? The operator has a license for 4 individuals. There's a level of autonomy because you have your own bedroom, your own food, and then the operator's role as the operator is to make sure it's a safe environment, right? Exit routes, fire extinguishers. Hey, is the place okay? Hey, Tom didn't come back tonight, right? Because even though when I was in the shelter world, you would know, like the case note, hey, so-and-so is supposed to be home. So you call the operator, you go, hey, Tom's here for shelter care. Well, I'll come pick him up or tell him he can come back home. So you're on it, Doug. And you said this was your sister?
Yes. Yeah.
My brother had bipolar, passed away 4 years ago, schizoaffective. I moved him back from Florida. Can't send you more money, but if you can come back and live with me, then you're not going to be broke, right? I was just paid for 4 months, worst thing I ever did, because now I just want money every Friday. Let's put you on allowance, right? That wasn't enough. But by the grace of God, he got his own place, but he was a musician. But so some people need their own space. So an adult care facility gives you that space and gives you and your family that space. Because what about your kids? What about your wife?
It's hard.
You smell, man. Like, dude, I'll be like, hey, you're going to wear out the carpet. Like, why can't we just sit down and have a conversation? And this was my brother, right? So this was before I was in the mental health field, before I even knew what mental health was. I thought he was a bully growing up, right? You're just always getting in trouble. But as I figured it out, I read a brochure one day. It had him all in there. So, Doug, I'll just pray for you. But sometimes it's adult care facility, and I'm going to stop because this almost leads into another conversation about a guardian. Because what we do is we run into hundreds of individuals that have their own money, make their own choices, and I don't need anybody's help. But you're not housed, right? I'm not washing my clothes. I'm hungry. I don't know if you're smoking your money, eating your money, but I'm not going to judge you. It just appears that you need some additional help. Okay, is that fair?
Yeah.
And John, if I could just add one other thing, more model. I was just saying, for specifically the reentry population, another model that's very similar to those adult care facilities is a 3/4 house, right? And an organization that does these very well is the Exit Program. They have it where there's a curfew, there's a time where you can leave.
Yeah.
I think if we couple that with in-home access to programming, counseling, and care, I think that could be a great model because it eliminates the barrier of transportation. It eliminates the barrier of having access. And then it also gives them the ability to utilize those resources on kind of like a on-demand basis. So say, for example, we have, I'm just going to use Ohio Health, right? They're a big medical provider, but say they have a psychiatrist in there and that can go into the house every single Tuesday from 11 to 1. They have access now to a psychiatrist. You see what I'm saying? Then a peer supporter can come in from,
Huge.
3 to 5, right? A peer supporter can come in from 3 to 5 and work with individuals on a one-on-one basis, and then we can embody that model. We can do a hybrid and we can build a framework out of that. But I think the 3/4 house model is a great model because it's very, very autonomous. It's very, very individualized, and it gives people that space that they need to look at themselves and say, hey, what does my life look like being self-directed and self-motivated?
And there's that cycle, guys. I'm not going to try to stick on the subject. There's a cycle, right? 3/4 house shelter, 3/4 house or adult care facility, the shelter. And so it takes about 4 years for somebody to come back in the shelter world. I caught myself 2 years ago saying, I haven't seen you in 4 years. I haven't seen you in 4 years. So what I started to do is I started to go back in a case. So wouldn't you know, it was 4 years. I wasn't making it up. So everything we're doing is, and I can only say that because I was there for like 13 years, right? So I had a couple cycles with you, right? And so there's this 4-year thing. The VA says it's 4 years times a veteran becomes homeless. So everything like Stanley said, and the questions you're asking is you see the words recidivism in the shelter, right? I left the halfway house to 3/4 house. I went to the mental hospital. I caught another case. So our role is how do we interrupt the cycle? What do we get to do differently in that course of why we have you? Because I don't like the word, what's the word I'm talking about? It's not transitional. There's a really fancy word, but you're moving around. So only thing we can do is while you're in front of us, that's the only time I can do my best work. If you disappear, I don't know where you went. I don't know. Transient, that's the word I don't like.
Then let me ask you a question regarding the peer supportive housing. Say I'm from agency A, whatever, I'm in a small county where we don't have peer supportive housing. How do I go about looking in to get funding for peer supportive housing? What's the steps or to find out more about that module that you guys have talked about?
Stanley, you got anything on that? The only thing that I've seen is grants.
Okay.
Is people got good grant writers. They're figuring out what's the next grant. The grant that I'm working underneath for the whole program is over in September 2023. So I will no longer be able to do what I'm doing in this capacity. I hope somebody picks it up. I think it's valuable. It was a 5-year grant, but when it's gone, how does that person stay home?
Where would you go, Sean, to go find a grant possibly coming up? Would that be like HUD? Would that be just some
whether NPI does it or the other somebody picks it up? For me personally, by the grace of God, I don't know what's going to happen, but I think there's value in the piece that I get to do. But it goes back to dollars. I think we're all talking about dollars. Because I'm gonna just how many places in your community are asking for the same dollars, or how many places in your 40-mile radius is asking for the same dollars? So I'm gonna stop with that because I'm not trying to turn to something else. But it's all about dollars, man.
Yeah, I'll just add to that, Sean. I think that's a great point, right? Everybody's trying to get access to the same pools of money. And that's okay. You know what I mean? That's just part of the game and the nature of grants. But I think two places specifically to answer your question, John, you can go to Corporation for Supportive Housing, a nationwide organization, and Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services. They tell you what it takes to become qualified, certified as a peer or permanent supportive housing model, and then also give you the qualifications and criteria to do that, and be able to receive people from them on a referral basis. So that's an opportunity there. One of the ways that we're innovatively doing it, just to be really transparent, Young Christian Professionals Organization is doing it through crowdsourcing. So essentially fundraising models, we're casting vision. We have a program model for this. We just got our first house. It's a 10-room house, boarding house, that has a common area, a common kitchen. They live together, they dwell together, they work together, they do programs together, and it creates a sense of community that they can then thrive in. It's their own people group, and they're doing amazing doing it. Again, that's not necessarily the model for everybody. However, that's something that we found to work for specifically people that are navigating reentry as well as mental illness and substance use disorder. And so, yeah, I would say if you have, people in your local network, in your community, in your Rolodex, as people like to say, pray through those names, see who the Holy Spirit leads you to, call them up and say, hey, there's some great innovation. I think, and being collaborative in that essence,
Yeah.
right? Being willing to say, hey, this is what I'm dreaming about. What does this look like in your world? Do you have support that you would be willing to bring to the table, whether that's time, talent, or treasure? I think those three things together collectively make a difference in people's lives. And so, if you find somebody in your local region that's doing it well, Doug, specifically for you, I'm thinking of South Street Ministries. They're doing an amazing job over there, and the work that they're doing, helping people navigate reentry. Lean into that model. Maybe it's being innovative in how you can utilize those funds and accessing those funds, giving them access to the funds and the resources in the community to help build these units, or take the dilapidated buildings and renovate them. Like, I pass by vacant school buildings all the time, and in my mind, I'm like, what a beautiful permanent supportive housing unit that nobody seems to care about. And so, I
Totally.
think through that thing, and being innovative, being creative, and being willing to be cutting edge and take risks, right? If we want to be game changers, sometimes, I think about the mustard seed of faith. And sometimes all it requires is somebody to say, you know what? I believe in this population of people enough to say, I'm going to use my mustard seed and move this mountain in Jesus' name. I think if we have a table of people who are willing to take their mustard seed of faith and do like they did in the book of Acts, get rid of all their possessions, bring them to the table and say, here it is. How can we advance the kingdom of God? I think then we can see true systemic change and really, really, truly make an impact on the lives of those who are navigating this experience, and do it in a way where they are valued, they have a sense of belonging, and they have a voice that can be heard.
Amen.
And you kind of started answering the next question there, Stanley, of what are the things, if I'm in a community now, you want to start really focusing on this. You just kind of talked about it right then and there, and what we should do. Do you have any other suggestions, or should we reach into Sean's knowledge for this?
Yeah, dive into Sean's knowledge, and then I can maybe tidy it up, because I do have a little bit more I can add to it.
Okay. So Sean, what would you say community should focus on? Two things.
Man, Stanley hit it, man, because we all can get a voice when we want one. We can all use Facebook when we want it. I'm addicted to TikTok. I could probably throw something together and get some audience tonight. So we have to use our resources. But what it started with, I like how Stanley said it, that mustard seed, it has to go. Let me read this on my phone right here really quick. And this is, and not to be, Benjamin Franklin said it like this: justice will not be served unto those who are unaffected are as outraged as those that are. Benjamin Franklin, it's my screensaver. So when we begin to get outraged because that person can't get home, we're going to go knock on the mayor's door. We're going to go to the homeless board. We're going to go to the reentry coalition meetings. We're going to begin to go, why can't this person, this? And that's all it takes. It just takes one of us, right? And it's not billable hours. Please forgive me. I've learned that phrase this year. Forgive me. Please, I don't want to offend anybody. I just get to do the work I do, not on billable hours, okay? But it's going to take somebody that can go down and get a voice. Because guess what? Somebody's going to give you something. I had a buddy start an organization. The local hospital gave him $26,000, and we've housed 6,000 veterans since 4 years later. All you had to do is go to a local hospital and go, I got a vision. Here's $26,000. And now the 6,000, like 23 veterans have been housed 4 years later. So back to what Stanley said, it doesn't take this big recipe. You don't have to be Betty Crocker to figure it out. Just go down to the courthouse. You know who your mayor is. You know who your homeless board is. And you have to start asking questions. We can do it, man. We can. Now, is it an overnight? No, it's not an overnight. Will you be able to do it all? Probably not. Can you get an audience? Yes. You can even use YouTube. People are getting paid on YouTube. Come on, Stanley, you could probably have a channel, right? Getting paid to get the message out there.
That's funny, Sean. That, you know, I've had the invitation to start one of those, but I've constantly said no, just simply
No,
because I'm like,
no,
you know what,
no.
man, for me, I'm a grassroots worker. I love working with the people, but I leave it to other people. And I say, hey, if you're going to give me a space to share my voice, bring some people with me that can share their
Yeah.
voice, I'll show up. But
Come on.
in connection to that, Sean, I think I'm going to read a verse of scripture that I think resonates very well with what we're asking and what we're talking about here. And it's from Jeremiah 22, verse 3. And it says, this is what the Lord says: be fair-minded and just. Do what is right. Help those who have been robbed. Rescue them from their oppressors. Quit your evil deeds and do not mistreat foreigners, orphans, and widows. Stop murdering the innocent. And I think it's a call back to one thing. I think it starts for us as a community to just build relationships with people, to empower them, to give them a sense of dignity, a sense of value, a sense of belonging, and who are currently or have navigated this area of mental health and justice involvement. And I think it helps us to first be open-minded, learn from them, and grow with them as they educate us, who maybe don't have that personal lived experience. And for those of us who do, it may be an opportunity for us to step up and be at the table, an equitable table, not a table. So one of the things I get real frustrated with is when somebody says, hey, I'm looking for some peer supporters. And I'm like, okay, sweet, man. What's the salary looking like? $13 an hour. And I'm like, yo, I can literally go to Burger King and make more doing burgers rather than pouring my lifeblood, right, into this work. And I'm telling you, as a peer supporter myself and a master facilitator and a supervisor, it's 24/7. It's 24/7. Like, life doesn't stop happening just because, hey, you know what? It's 8 o'clock and I gotta cut the phone off. No, there's somebody in the middle of a crisis who needs somebody there. And what are we going to do about that? How are we going to respond to that? And so I think it starts there. And I think it allows them, the people who have that lived experience, empowering them with the opportunity at equitable tables to shape the decisions, to shape the services, to shape the policies, and so on and so on, learning new perspectives and experiences from other people who have the lived experience. And I think we as a community have to do a better job at opening those tables for people with that lived experience. They are competent. They are able. Their voice, I'm telling you, will change your life. We have a reentry meeting every single Wednesday. And literally, for the first time, I hear it all the time. They say, for the first time, I felt like my voice mattered. For the first time, I was able to be a part of a community and help shape it. And it changes their lives. I mean, it literally changes their lives. I have a guy right now, he's been coming for 4 months. And now for the first time, he's like, man, you know what? I got dreams of being an entrepreneur, of starting a business, leaving legacies to my kids. And this is a brother that has navigated the justice system, has been home since 2015 and has been homeless. And just having a space at a table where he belonged, where he was seen, where he was known and he mattered, changed his life. And so I think it's creating those places that, are equitable for people with lived experience, that are inclusive and allow people to make this redemptive nature of this work a lifelong career, not just volunteer opportunities. People with lived experience can bring the most impactful and effective change, but we as a community have to be willing to make it a paid opportunity for people to eliminate the stressors of being able to provide for themselves and their families, and also make a living, just like we pay the people at the table who have never experienced these things themselves. So.
That's good.
Thank you. Well, we're coming close to the end of the hour. So we do have one question, and I do want to make sure we get to it. So for Sean and Stanley, what help is available for a person labeled as a violent offender that you guys know of?
Well, you probably can't be any more specific. I mean, it's a pretty broad question. So, because my mind goes to what specific resources are we talking? A job? I'm assuming we're talking housing. I'm just going to assume.
Yeah, let's
that
stick with
we're
housing.
talking So what that would normally be as a private landlord. Here's the best example I got. I work with his family. I say, let's go fill out this application. He's got a judgment for $19,000. Like tore up you would have thought they built a new place after he moved out, but I had the judgment, tore up the plate, $19,000, had an eviction, and he filled out the application, housed with his voucher. Did that person care about the violent crime? No. Did he care if he was on RSO? No. He had a social security check, never ran a background check. And by the grace of God, he's there now. They've been home for 7 months. So when you look at that, you have to stay, and please forgive me if I'm getting off track. You have to stay away from like the commercial places. Hey, let me just get $30 from you. Let me just run all like, I'm not going to pay you to tell me what I already know. I'm not going to pay you for the time I just served. I could tell you about that. So it's more landlords that are going to say, hey, here you go. Because it didn't matter. I mean, this judgment was for $19,000. Like in my mind, like, oh my God, when I first got my client, we're going to have a problem here. But guess what? They've been housed, had a voucher. And so that's what it is. It's just, I'm going to say it this way too. It's the frontline people taking a hit for that brother, right? Because I'll take a hit. Tell me no. Tell me to get the heck out of here. Tell me to forget about the application. And then I just tell them, hey, we got to look down the street. Not to say that's the right answer, but guess what, man? We're not going to change these landlord laws. We're not going to change the discrimination policy. We're not going to change the 3 times the rental amount. We're not going to change, I need a 550 to 650 credit score. We're not going to change all that stuff. But this individual does need an address.
Sean, yeah, I definitely hear those frustrations and can understand those and empathize with you on those, because we get oftentimes the same things in our plate. But one of the beautiful things that I've seen, and I've seen it effectively done, is advocacy. Literally just having somebody that's willing to follow up with the landlord and say, hey, look, I know this individual has this maybe in their history. We are working with this individual on a one-on-one basis. We are in his home. We are doing the permanent supportive housing, intensive case management. We're working a plan. He's developing that plan. He's invested. He's bought in. Here's a list of his accomplishments since we've been working with him. And prior to that, I think advocacy is a huge, huge thing. And one of the resources that does that is Young Christian Professionals, right? So like literally, we have a team from Cleveland down to Cincinnati. This is not a public service announcement or anything like that. Another resource is South Street Ministries. They're an advocacy role. They have reentry mentors. I would even say people like MPI would be a great resource to tap into, because I think, Sean, you're an amazing salesman. And if you couldn't sell water to a well, I'd be surprised. But with that being said, just explaining to landlords really the essence of the type of support that you bring to the table. So perfect example. I'm working with a guy right now who has an arson on his record. That's considered a violent offense. I myself am a violent offender. And navigating the housing experience, me and my wife, just a little backstory, went through 36 apartments before we finally found a yes. Me and my wife, when we first got married. And so, my experience isn't unique. This is the story amongst all my peers. But I had to fight and I had to persistently pursue that God's yes, right? And so, how do you walk alongside somebody through that, through that process? That is the support that landlords are looking for. And I'm gonna just be really, really candid. If I'm being really upfront, landlords don't care as long as they're getting a guaranteed rent. Honestly, I've seen it time and time and time again. I work in 10 different counties in the state of Ohio through the Licking County Coalition for Housing. If I say, hey, look, you're going to get, as long as this individual is participating in the program, doing monthly home visits, you're going to get somebody who lays eyes on your unit. You're going to get a guaranteed check in the mail, and you're going to get somebody who's going to mitigate and work through and try to resolve any issues before they become bigger crises. And so I found that it's worked, and they've said yes. So I just keep pitching the same slide, you know. But the name of those organizations, just again, real quick, and then I'll pass it over to you, Sean, Tylisha, was Young Christian Professionals, which is the organization I have a privilege of serving with, and then South Street Ministries is another organization as well that provide reentry advocacy. Go ahead, Sean.
Hey, John, right before you jumped on with everyone else, me and Stanley said we both have an arson guy. So mine, I got a denial letter. I got a hold of his caseworker. I said, hey, man, I need a letter, advocacy letter, which I got that. He says he's going to come. So we're going to go to this meeting because I'm just not going to sit there and go, you're a nice guy. Let's bring it on. So that's the stuff we have to do. Advocacy letter. He's doing all his treatments. He's a different guy, and come to the meeting. So I have a meeting that's getting ready to happen. I don't have the date, but it's just a no. Like, okay, so it's a denial letter. Okay, print it out. Let's go on to the next. So we want to know, like, for example, maybe where's that at in your policy? Maybe that's the next step. Where does it say an arson person can't live here? I mean, obviously he made a mistake. You know, it was a big article, but that's what we got to do. And Stanley said the best. I'm not trying to sell anything, man. I'm not. And I learned all this from advocating for people, right? Because if we're not out front doing it, how are you going to get home, right? It's just next, and next. So we just happen to be, how do you want to say it, man? The bridge in the gap.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, we're at our hour mark. And I really appreciate, I believe you guys gave a lot of insight today, and you gave a lot of some great information. I thank you for helping this collaborative effort here to help out with the housing issue, and going above and beyond for what you guys do for your community in Licking and in Toledo area. Thank you very much. And if anyone does want to still connect up with Sean and Stanley, I'm going to highly encourage you to go ahead and go on the Whova app, send them a message. You know, you might meet up with them, get more information about the organizations. You guys are the boots on the ground, and I thank you for everything you're doing. And I wish everyone has the best of the great day. So
Appreciate you guys. Thanks for all your time.